Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Writers Infusion. I'm your host, Susan. I'm here with Dave, Jen, Julie, and Ed. And we are here today to read an excerpt from a short story. It's historical fiction. It's called A Dawn of Peace by Tom Heeren. Tom is from Kansas. I'm going to read a quick synopsis. It's very quick, it's only a sentence. And then Ed is going to read the excerpt for us. The story focuses on a mother of 3 children who faces the haunting reality of the end of the Great War on November 11th, 1918.
Mary Hopkins, recently widowed, was knitting a scarf for one of her best friend's son who was at the front when noise outside interrupted the peace of her study. Her heart beat heavily as she put the knitting aside on the sofa and went to the window. Mary slowly opened the window and leaned forward to observe her neighbors going out of their houses to find out what was going on. Not sure what was going on, Mary closed the window and pulled the curtains shut. She was overwhelmed with sadness and guilt as she walked to the door. Bad memories caught Mary shaking hands on the door. A peel of sweat began to appear around the face. Mary, a beautiful woman of 35 years old, with blonde hair arranged in a knot, panted heavily, imagining the worst. My God, what's wrong with me? Am I imagining things out of the world? Mary thought as she struggled with the knob trying to open it. She pled to God for guidance while looking up to the ceiling, but it never appeared. Mary returned to the sofa and broke into tears. After 10 to 15 minutes, she composed herself as she stood up. Mary came to the door, getting ready for a new day. The passing of Mary's husband, Alfred, at the Marne battle left the Hopkins family with a great loss. 2 teenage sons, Peter and Henry, and 1 10-year-old daughter, Kathleen, helped their mother deal with the tragedy themselves. Despite the loss of their father and husband, the family avoided poverty through investments made by Alfred, who worked as a vice president of a local bank. When the Great War began on 4 August 1914, Alfred decided to join the army to fight for king and country. 2 years later, he lost his life due to shrapnel hitting him on the head, causing him to fall to the ground. Thinking about the tragic events caused Mary to grieve more. After a while, she descended down the stairs, humming a popular wartime tune, keeping the home fires burning. The front hall was welcomed with numerous bouquets scattered across the room. Mary stood in the center, contemplating the tranquility. Mr. Johnston, the butler, came out of the back stairs door, carrying a note on a salver. He bowed to his mistress. "Good morning, ma'am," Mr. Johnston said. "I have a message from your brother. He's at the War Ministry and will be home shortly. Anything else I can do for you?" Mary shook her head and took the message on the salver. She scanned it briefly and returned it to the salver. Mary knew that Peter, her younger brother, was working at the War Ministry as a counselor to the Minister of War. He lost his wife Angela of 15 years to the dreadful Spanish flu in September 1918. They had 2 children, one 18-year-old son attending Oxford, and a 22-year-old daughter working as a VAD nurse at the front. The house had 3 children and 2 adults in all, and both Mary and Peter had to master the responsibility of raising them. Mary sighed and looked at her black dress, still 6 inches from the floor, representing the new style of late 1918. "No, thank you, Johnston," Mary replied. "Very well, ma'am. May I leave now?" the butler asked. "Of course, you may go. Thank you very much." The butler bowed and took the cue. Mary marched to the sitting room to reflect on the strange events outside 152 Eaton Place, her and Peter's home. She took one of the magazines from a small table and went to her sofa. Mary leaned back, flipping through the pages of Women's Weekly for an article to read. The clock above the fireplace showed 11 a.m. "Johnston, the war is over. Can you get the servants downstairs to the front door?" Peter's voice echoed in the front hall. Mary's head jerked from the magazine, causing her to be surprised. Mary put the magazine away and rose to open the door. She saw a deliriously happy Peter, her cook, Paula, and Katie, the 2 housemaids. Mary was both embarrassed and shocked at the spontaneous sight. She tiptoed behind Peter, causing the housemaids to curtsy fast before their disapproving mistress. Johnston was rather restrained in controlling his happiness at the happy news. He stood near the backstairs door. "Sorry about your brother hugging us. Have you heard the news?" Katie asked nervously. "The war's over, ma'am. Aren't you happy for all of us?" Mary looked at the happy servants in shell shock and felt lightheaded. Peter sensed that his older sister was near fainting and crossed to help her from fainting. Mary collapsed before Peter, bursting into tears. My God, is it true that the war is over? Mary sobbed as she held Peter's arms. Yes, sister, we're at peace at last. Do get up and we'll have champagne to toast to peace. Johnston, would you get a bottle of champagne and 2 goblets for Mrs. Hopkins and me in the library? Very well, sir, Johnston said, bowing to the siblings. He went backstairs, the other servants following him.
Do you want to cut it for a second?
With the household staff gone, Peter and Mary looked at each other. The siblings walked to the library next door and entered it. The library has a small table, few chairs, and 3 high bookcases on the right and left walls. They contained many books from many centuries and few paperback books. In the center there was a French window with doors leading to the balcony. Mary and Peter walked to the table and embraced each other. Mary looked up from the hug and looked at Peter. Wow, we're lucky that we survived the Great War and the Spanish flu, Mary replied as she held her brother tightly. As for your wife, we'll remember her from time to time, right? Peter sadly nodded and released Mary from the embrace. He walked to the window and opened the doors and looked at the crowds gathering in the square. Mary joined her grieving brother on the balcony. She looked out at the happy atmosphere, feeling relieved. Mary could not believe her eyes. The war was over now. She left Peter and walked to the bookcase with her beloved Alfred's portrait on the 4th shelf. He was in his official uniform of the Wiltshire Regiment. She smiled at the portrait, sobbing. Thank God the horrible war is over. Your children and I will have peace at last. I wish you'd be here to celebrate the special occasion with us, my dear. But you're in heaven with God. I hope you're proud of our accomplishments, Mary said, as she wiped away her tears. There you go. Mary touched the picture with tender love. She returned to the balcony and looked at the happy crowds. Mary touched Peter's arm. Are you okay? Mary asked gently. I'm fine, thank you. God, I can't believe that we men have to return to the jobs and the women to being housewives again. What about you, my sister? Mary shrugged at the question. I don't know yet. Maybe I'll join a voluntary organization at the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Sick Children, or something like that. I must occupy myself to help my children and myself. It's hard these days, you know. Peter nodded and turned to observe the happy scene. Mary mouthed "Excuse me" to him and walked inside. She sighed as she took her family King James Bible out of the right bookcase and put it on a nearby table. Trying to find something to help her understand the mystery of peace, Mary fumbled through the pages to find a suitable scripture that deals with peace. She found Romans and scanned its verses until she came to 15:13. Mary read the verse aloud. Now the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, that you may abound in hope through the power of the Holy Ghost. She repeated it over and over to make her understanding clear. Mary smiled to herself as she put the King James Bible away and raised her eyes to God. Thank God for making me aware of Romans 15:13. Peace is what we should need as we celebrate the end of the Great War. Praise to God.
Okay. I am sorry. Just getting over being sick, so I apologize.
You're not getting
Tom.
over. No.
I'm still
You're still sick.
I'm just in the middle of getting everyone else sick. Okay, so I wanted to start this off by saying the first couple of pages, I understood that Mary's sitting there knitting and whatnot, but I kind of got lost right away as to where she was even in the house. And when she went to get up and open the door, I thought that she was opening the front door, but then it wasn't, it was the bedroom door. So I was just kind of confused. But I'm gonna, if I take a step back even from that, I want to take a moment to talk about setting. And right now you have this woman who's sitting there, she's obviously very upset, her husband has died. And when you started off with Mary Hopkins, recently widowed, was knitting a scarf for one of her best friend's sons, blah, blah, blah. Even though it says at the front, it's almost like a happy thing. I go like, here she is, she's knitting. And so if I were to start it off like a tiny bit differently, I might say something like, Mary sat in the living room, or wherever she's at, the bedroom, upstairs, tell us where she is, her knitting untouched, staring out the window. Just something a little bit different so that we understand that she's...
Different mood.
Yes, a totally different mood, because even though you end up understanding what's going on, for some reason that first sentence started off totally different for me than I think you meant it to start off. And then from there, I needed a better idea of where she was in the house. I was kind of confused. And
Yeah.
then I'll stop.
I mean, it's interesting that you talk about the setting, because it's not clear to me until a few pages in that they're in England and that these are very wealthy people, okay? And I think that raises another issue because I don't think they speak like upper class British people. They use a lot of common expressions and a lot of American expressions.
Like wow.
I
like
just
wow.
wrote that one down too.
Oh.
I said, was there even wow in 1918?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
So I marked it in a few places, but I think it would be good to go through and make them sound like British people, because right now I don't think they do very much.
I agree.
So it's kind of a strange atmosphere given the way that they're speaking.
And as part of setting and mood, even when you get to the second paragraph, the last, here she is, she's sad, she's about to walk to the door. Mary, a beautiful woman of 35 years old with blonde hair arranged in a knot, panted heavily, imagining the worst. That's a lot.
Yes.
Now, first of all, if she's panting heavily or she's imagining the worst, I really don't care if her hair's tied in a knot. Right? Put that in somewhere else. You want to stick with the mood, but then you're taking me away from that by describing what her hair looks like.
Plus, you don't know what the worst is. What is the worst?
I don't
Yes.
And that's where I got kind of lost, because this noise interrupted her knitting. And then the noise just kind of
Goes away.
She goes to open the door,
But she doesn't.
and then she's overwhelmed with emotion. We don't know why.
She
There's
closes
guilt,
the door and opens a
and
magazine.
right, there's guilt.
Yes.
There's something wrong there.
Yeah, there's guilt and sadness, but we still don't know why. And then we never hear anything else about the
Right.
noise.
Right, and we don't know what the
pages.
noise is. I mean, it could be voices, it could be sirens, it could be
Right.
explosions.
Yeah,
Right.
We
She's
have no
totally
idea.
left it.
If
She's
I
heard the noise
it
and
just
then
goes
it's gone.
away.
That's right.
Right.
If I could tie in the wow, I wrote start with a figurative or literal bang. I mean, start with a bang. Really pull us in. I wasn't so
Yeah.
moved that Mary is sitting there knitting. A loud noise disturbed Mary, blah, 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 blah. Or what did the noise sound like? Because we
Right,
need to know. She
exactly.
goes to the door, and then it's a few paragraphs farther down. My God, what's wrong with me? She struggled with the knob trying to open it, but the antecedent of it is door, and it's a few lines up. So she really needs to tighten that, jump into it. Go out the door or don't. Then she sits with a
Right.
magazine, as Dave pointed out. She looks out the window. She's wondering about her neighbors, but she backs off.
And then we're hearing
there's no
about the
urgency.
family.
Yes,
The family
yes.
and her brother and their kids and who they are, and there's just a whole big description.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we know the war's about to be over, so none of that really matters yet.
And then the brother's wife, so he says he lost his wife. So at this point, I don't know what year it is yet, but he says he lost his wife Angela of 15 years.
He had just lost her.
But they have children 18 years old and 22 years old, so how is that?
Excellent point.
Good math. I didn't even think that.
I didn't watch
Unless
that.
they
I didn't know there was going to be math.
I understand, unless they weren't married before they had the kids, but I doubt that,
Those
right?
Those are Mary's kids. Their kids
I don't
are
know,
younger.
this
Their
is
kids
enough.
No, Mary's
No.
not true. No,
Peter
Mary
has
has
two
two.
kids.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Mary has two teenage sons
That's a
and a
good point.
10-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Oh, by another marriage, maybe?
Yes.
But it
Wow.
says
Wouldn't that
he
be
lost
nice
his
mix?
wife.
There's
No,
something
they
going on
had-
there.
Another twist in
Yeah,
the
they
story.
had two
Right.
children. So,
You're right,
and
Jen.
how
Big
long has she
tanky
been
going on
dead?
Yeah, I know it.
So as I read on, I realized, okay, if this is November 1918, then she's only been dead for a couple months. But like if you would say that 2 months ago, Angela had died.
Another example, too, of going back and forth, not staying in the moment. At the second page, when Mr. Johnson comes in and says, I have a message from your brother, then there's a whole paragraph about that, like what you're talking about the brother. And by the time she's done
Yes.
telling us about the children and the whole bit, I forgot she was talking to anybody,
Right.
right?
Right.
So you have to stay in the
She
moment.
never says what the note says.
Right,
What's a
that's
salver?
right.
Oh, I had
I
to
don't
look
know,
that
but
up.
it's
I'm
a
sorry.
tray.
That's
It's a
what
silver
it
tray.
is.
It's a beautiful
said it
word
3
3
times.
times. There was a lot of repetition. I hate to say it. There were
Okay.
a lot of happiness
Lot
on
of
page
word
3.
echo. Yeah.
Happy I
wrote
saw
down
in the
happy.
story 5 to 7 times. That's a lot of happy. So do be careful. I marked up the redundancy.
The word echo.
When I started reading this, I approached it as though it were a novel, my era. I'll put up with a lot of the drivelly kind of stuff if it's going to lead to a novel-length excitement. This is a short story.
Oh, that's true.
Man, you got to hit them on the first page. Start out with the war's over. So, but this, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know the whole story. This is a story of transition. They're going from wartime suffering to peacetime, whatever it brings. We don't know. We've only got 5 pages. So that is difficult to do in a short story, I think. There's not enough time to do it. But I entered this as if it were a novel. Fine, okay, I'll put up with it. But no, not for a short story. You really have to nail it on the first page.
Right. And to your point about this being a short story, I mean, presumably by the end of the story, something changes. I mean, obviously the war ended, so that is a change. But what is changing for the characters?
Right.
I mean, her husband was dead. He's still dead. She was taking care of her kids. She's still taking care of her kids. They were rich. She's still rich. What exactly has changed?
Yeah, there's nothing
That's a great
vested.
point.
For this,
There's no
for this
problem
woman
yet.
Their
from beginning to
occupations will
end.
change, but they talk so casually about that. Oh, I think I might go
But
get a job.
what
unless it's-
is her occupation? See, that's the thing.
Right.
We don't know what her situation is at the beginning of the story to know how it's different at the end.
Very
is she
good
not
point.
volunteering now? Why would she not volunteer during the war and start volunteering after the war?
Right.
Yes.
Good point.
I don't
Yeah,
get what the change
and the
is.
volunteering part I didn't get. I didn't even get that they were rich. I don't know why.
It took me half the story
But
to
it
get that.
says, it's hard these days, you know, after she talked to, and if she's volunteering, that's not gonna help.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
how's that gonna help the income of the family if she's volunteering?
Well, I thought it was weird for her to even say it's hard these days when she's, I mean, I
They
know her
have
husband
servants,
died.
they have
Right,
big
so
house.
Seems to be
that's
doing quite
right. So
nicely.
what's
There
so
are
hard?
bouquets of
Everything's
flowers.
relative.
Yeah,
You know,
she
it's
has
all
a
relative.
Suppose, but then what do we care?
They have to use the second best silver, you know.
Yeah,
I did mention redundancy before. I do want to pull you to page 1, and there are some word choices I would rethink. Haunting reality of the end of the Great War. I would think it's pretty awesome that the Great War ended. I don't know, I used the word haunting in the summary,
Yeah.
but more importantly, I think paragraph 2, a peal of sweat began to appear around the face. That's a lovely word, but it should be a bead of sweat, a peal of laughter, a peal of a bell.
You know what? I missed it
well,
when her
I think
brother.
it's the wrong peel. It's peel,
Oh, right.
P. So I thought of it like a peel, like it coated her face almost like it could
Oh,
peel off.
really?
But it's still, it's a homophone. It's the
No,
wrong
that's
peel.
true.
It's
That's
pe-
true.
Well, you know what?
I don't
Does
know.
anyone? The second when you read it today, I was fine. But the first time I read it, I didn't realize that Peter was a brother.
There's
and where
another Peter.
he was.
There's another Peter.
Oh,
One of the
there
sons
is?
is Peter.
So
I was
I
very
was-
confused
I
about
was
son
very
and nephew
confused
and
about
uncle
who
and
was
She
father.
has a
son,
Yes.
Peter,
Yeah, I didn't
also.
catch that. That
Yeah,
the
so
son was
when
Peter.
was-
I knew.
and then when
I
the other
understood.
Peter brother
That threw me.
came home, I thought he was in the house already,
Yeah.
and I thought it was really strange that the first thing he says, which is on the top of my page 3, Johnson, the war is over. Can you get the servants downstairs to the front door? I mean, how about, I don't know, looking for a sister or
Gather the children.
It
Where
just
are the
seems
children?
so. It just seems so strange that he wasn't
Yes.
looking for the rest of the family
Yes.
as soon as he walks into the door.
Yes.
And he sent a note, and then 5 minutes later he's home. So why did he send the note if he's going to be home in 5 minutes?
Right. I know.
Yes.
It's
It's
strange.
just kind of.
Yes.
It's and unless hours passed, but that's not clear. And there's a lot of there's too much play-by-play. Mary grabbed a magazine. Mary sat on the couch. Then she leaned back. Then she flipped through the magazine looking for an article. You don't need all the
irrelevant.
verbs, right? You don't need all the verbs.
Yeah.
And I would do a search for the word look, because you use the word look a lot. A lot of people are looking at each other, and
Right.
you don't need the play-by-play. It slows things down.
And then when she's talking to her brother at the end. First, I didn't feel like there was enough of a reaction from her, but
Yes.
she was saying at the end, "I'm fine, thank you, God. I can't believe that we men have to return to the jobs and the women to being housewives again." So it just seemed like such an awkward thing for him to say. I mean, right
Yes.
now you're just all in shock. The war's over.
They should be elated.
You're
dancing.
thankful,
Yes.
right, elated,
Why are they
or-
not elated?
And then at the end, that's right. So
Well,
you're
it's going
supposed
to
to
be bittersweet for them.
but it just
because
seems
they've
so
lost
strange
people.
at the end, right? But at the very end, when you're probably still in the throes of this, she's saying, trying to find something to help her understand the mystery of peace. What's the mystery
I said
of
there's
peace?
no mystery. The war
And then
is the
she's
mystery.
pulling out a book while all this stuff's going on around her and looking.
yeah.
something
Maybe
up.
she's looking for inner peace, so although the world is at peace, she has still lost her
Is
husband.
this simply a house shrouded in depression?
Yes.
This one died, and that one died, and this one died, and big deal, the war's over. My life is not going to get better. Is that the story? I don't
That's
know.
interesting.
Well, that could be.
Yeah.
I don't know what the story is.
Yeah.
Big deal, and then she ends up committing suicide at the end or something. Just to complete the
Right.
cycle. I don't know. I don't know where we're going with this. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
I wrote this as an unbelievable time in world history. Have your story reflect that, because I don't feel this is remarkable. The family's remarkable. Their reactions aren't remarkable.
They're kinda dull.
And the characters seem two-dimensional. I don't mean to offend you. Two-dimensional, and they're wading through molasses. They're just moving so slowly.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I like the time element. It's a good place to start a story because something can just explode out of that.
Yes.
Again, it's a time of transition. You like get that whiplash effect. Things get going very well after World War I. You know, there's a wild 20s or whatever it is. But
Roaring
20s, yeah. So things got better. Certainly, people weren't dying.
Until the Depression.
Well, then the 30s. That's that was bad. I remember it so well.
But speaking of, we have Angela having died in the Spanish flu. Let's talk about that pandemic. That was massive. Did anyone else in the household get sick and recover? And how wonderful for them, but how awful that we lost her. And for Mary to say, we'll think about her now and again. Your wife, what? Name her Angela. And of course we're going to think about her always. We meet from time to time. That threw me.
But I guess
I
if
just
you're
It's a
taking
short story, though.
That's right.
He's going to have to take out a lot of these elements that you're talking about because it is a short story.
Right.
And you've got to do some study or research or read some short stories and figure out what it is that makes a successful short story. Interesting.
Is it Henry James who does the best short stories?
Focus.
Like the one with the girl and the comb in her hair, and she cuts her hair.
Oh, Henry.
Oh,
Henry.
Henry.
Thank
Oh my
you.
gosh. The Gift of the Magi.
The best.
Right, right.
Oh,
So that's a good
beautiful.
writer to read
Yes.
for an idea.
Paul
for
wrote
stories.
great short stories.
Oh,
Different
And it's
than-
historical. It's historical
Wonderful.
too, which is great. Like I loved some of the details. Like I liked the detail of how she looked down at her skirt, and it was, 6 inches higher. The new rage of fashion in 1918.
Was that daring
I liked
or was
those details.
Because I don't know
Obviously,
where it
the
was.
skirt was shorter. It
Was
was
it
6
shorter?
inches
Was it? Or was she
higher.
Oh, I thought she was
that-
floor length. I
couldn't
thought
No,
tell.
she was wearing it. She was trying to be
6 inches on the
fashion.
floor.
So you could
I
actually see her
love those
ankle.
details of historical fiction.
Johnston could see her ankle. Which adds to the
The
plot.
dog, they had a dog.
I think to Ed's point, and to what Dave was just saying about transition, this is a transitional time in history, and if you want to write a short story, then what is changing over that short period of time in this family?
Yeah.
And how are they going to
Define
be
where
affected?
they are and where they're
They're
going
going
to.
to be.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think
Yes.
that's the
And,
biggest thing that you have to do with
You
this
have to
story.
focus.
Yeah, and he's going
Really
to have
on
to
that.
he's going to have to sift through it and find out
Yeah.
the important elements because you
Right.
can't have all of these potential. Because I thought again, I was reading it. I thought it was a novel. We have this great expanse
Right.
of family, and we're going to follow segments of these people. No, not in a short story.
Yeah.
Man. You get
Right.
fouled up. But it gives me help. I'm reading a book of Truman Capote's short stories. Here's the good news. He was a terrific writer. Here's the bad news. Not all his early works were good. Some of them, my eyes are rolling back. I said, how can this get published? Well, it's Truman Capote.
Well, what's your phrase?
Oh, you've
he was
mentioned-
clearing his throat.
He was clearing
his
his throat.
throat.
He was very
Good
young.
stuff.
Some of them are knee-bucklingly beautiful. They just knocked me out. And others are
Was
just...
that the Christmas story one that came up in one episode?
Oh, yes, you raved
Well,
about
right?
it. Yes, we all read it
Oh,
after
yeah,
the
the Christmas
cousin.
tree. Yeah,
The cousin?
the Christmas
Oh, yeah,
tree.
yeah, yeah.
Suki.
Yeah,
Suki.
Sook.
Yes.
Okay.
Sook.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sook.
Sook's
Yeah,
cake.
Six cakes.
Right.
Well, and there's another one with sook in it that I just read. Again, that was very good. It must...
We're down to 1 minute, by the way.
Oh, sorry. I go to a commercial.
I digress.
Anything else you
should have
want to
a
bring
pop
up? We have
talk
about 1
commercial.
minute left. Anything else?
No, I would just say, overall, just watch the word echo. Various sentence starters. A lot of the sentences start with the word Mary. And just be clear about the sequence of things and how much time has passed. If you're going to
Chronology. Yeah.
talk about things that happened in the past, how long ago was it? And to Dave's point, if it is a short story, I thought it was a novel also. You just made me realize that it's a short story. You do have to kind of peel back the onion here and decide, what's going to stay and what's going to go, because all of
Elements.
this, I think will just bog down the story. Get to the core of what you're trying to tell.
Have her peel the
I agree.
onions and bring up tears. That's a
Oh,
great way
there
to
you
start
go.
this.
Okay, well, we hope that our critique today helped you. Thank you for submitting your story. Again, this is Tom Heeren from Kansas, which is pretty cool. And thank you everyone else for joining us today for this episode of Writers Infusion. We will see you next time. Keep writing.